Hi, my name is Shreya, and I am an incoming sophomore at UT Austin, and I'm an intern currently at InternNexus as the marketing and business lead intern. And I'm here with our esteemed guest, Mr. Usman Khan, and he's going to give us a brief introduction about himself.
Hi, Shreya, and thank you so much for having me on this podcast as part of Internexus. My name is Usman Khan. I serve as the career design counselor at Pepperdine University at the Graduate School of Education Psychology. I also work at the Khalil Center, which is a Muslim mental health nonprofit, as part of their team as a career counselor for the Muslim communities.
Sounds great. So we're going to get into our segments right now. So our first segment is the value of internships. So being a business student right now, I know that in McCombs, which is my business school, a lot of students are looking for internships, but sometimes they think it's just to put it on their resume. So in your opinion, Mr. Khan, why do you think students, regardless of their major, should pursue internships?
I think the best way to learn is through experiencing and through trying things. And so internships are a training ground for you, for students especially, to be able to try out new things because in career development theory and the research indicates that there's career indecision and there's also career indecisiveness, and there's a distinction between the two because career indecision is when a lot of students and people don't have exposure to the job market and to certain a lot of different occupations and professions, and that's part of the reason why a lot of students are not are experiencing indecision because they haven't experienced the job market, they haven't been able to do things on their own. And so what internships and experiential learning opportunities do is it creates a bridge where people can find out more about what they're expected to do on the job and be able to match and sort of level themselves and their brand and their background and see, is this something I want to do long term? Is this something I envision myself doing? And also consider, are these things I enjoy doing? Are these a value of me? So research also indicates that interests and both values are very reflective of people's career choices and decision making. And so when you try out a new internship, you can learn on your own. Do I value these kind of environments? Do I value these kind of settings? And do I value these kind of interests for myself in a long-term career? And internships also provide, again, a training ground where you can make mistakes. You can learn from your supervisors and from your colleagues and sort of build your own brand and portfolio in a nutshell.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think getting experiences in what you want to do long term, as a career path is such an invaluable experience. And growing up, actually, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And so I worked at a veterinary clinic for 2 years and I realized this might not be the path for me. And so through that experience, I was able to figure out like maybe this is not what I want to do. And I got internships, like a business internship at a local company in where I live. And I realized, hey, I really like marketing. I really like business development. And so I completely agree that getting internships really shows you like what you want to do and saves you like in the future if, after you do, like declare your major and you get into the job market, like you're avoiding that struggle of realizing, hey, this is not what I want to do.
That's an excellent example of exploring your interests and learning where you want to go. And not only does it internships tell you more about your interests and your values and what you want to do long term and short term, but also more about yourself as a person. Like, what is my personality like? What are my personal interests? What are my hobbies? What are my values? And seeing how that can inform your decision making to move forward. Because how I like to characterize career development is it's finding out more about first who you are, like who am I as a person, my aptitudes, my interests, my values, my personality, and then honing on where do I want to go. The next step is starting from who am I and then where do I want to go. And then the third step and fourth step is how do I want to get there and what are my opportunities available in the current job market for me to get to the avenue where I want to get to. So those are
Hmm.
some things I think it's important to highlight, starting from yourself. Career development and exploration starts with you understanding more about yourself and then helping you inform your next steps and mapping out your goals and objectives.
Hmm. And coming off of that point, do you think it's important before students search for internships to do like some research on what they enjoy. And some people just like get internships for the sake of, putting it on their resume as experience. But I think it's very important that the internship fits the student, and actually speaks to their interests. So could you give us like a little bit of insight on why it's important that people get internships that they're actually interested in?
Yeah, I think it's really important to research before even going into internship what are my initial interests and what are sort of my values and how do I want to approach those. So I think that speaking to people is we always encourage people to have initiate career conversations, which is essentially for the purpose of informational interviewing. Informational interviewing is when you interview someone about their career path to find out about how they got to where they are and also consider, do I see myself in this person's shoes and pursuing these kind of avenues and career paths. And so I always encourage my students and my clients to engage in information interviewing for the purpose of a career conversation, and so that you can find out more about the job market and also about the industry and the career path you're interested in. So that could be part of your research, also researching online. So there's a great website called onnetonline.org, the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And essentially on there, you can research any occupation available in the current job market and see what are the current roles and responsibilities, what are the salary trends and the wages and the employment wages, what does the job market look like in the next 8 to 10 years, considering also what are the values and also the knowledge I'm expected to have. So doing more research about a specific occupation can also help inform someone's next steps, along with speaking with others, and then also reflecting on your life experiences and considering like in career development, we call it flow or peak, essentially considering what are my what are 2 or 3 experiences I've been through, whether it be work or outside of work, that have helped me feel like I'm in my element. So considering those things as well, like self-reflection is really important. So considering like what are times where I felt like I was doing really well and I was enjoying what I was doing, and how do I want to characterize those and consider those in the avenue of my own career path.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's wonderful, wonderful advice. And going through the career journey yourself, do you have any personal like stories of your internship experiences or any struggles or successes you had during the recruitment or interview processes for those?
Sure, yeah. So, I went to graduate school. I went to a number of internships for my graduate school, and my program was in counseling, and my emphasis is in college counseling, student services, Cal State Northridge, and also went there for my undergrad. And so, finding internship, especially in undergrad, I feel like it's very competitive and challenging. But I learned that you can never be too sure. You do have to put yourself out there and focus on your personal and professional brand and your online presence, and that internships, it's kind of like a trial and error process, because I went through a number of interviews even during grad school for each of my fieldwork experiences. And just when I was encouraged, I found myself picking myself back up and realizing that, even if I face rejection, if I'm told that I'm not a fit for the internship that I interviewed for, I had other opportunities coming my way, and it aligned really well for me. For example, I interned not only at Cal State Northridge, but I interned at Pasadena City College as well as UCLA at the Career Center and at Cal State Channel Islands during my graduate school. And I realized that when you're interviewing for internships for any job, for any position, any role, it's essentially not only the employer interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them, getting a feel for understanding, is this a suitable fit for me? Is this something I want to consider and see myself doing? And so I realized the positions I was not called back for were not a good fit for me, and the positions what I was called back for and I ended up pursuing were actually a really really good fit. And so in retrospect, I realized that just as much of your just as much as you're being interviewed, you're also interviewing the employer or the recruiter or the hiring manager about, do I want to work here? Do I see myself being in this space with these kind of colleagues, and do I connect with the employer's vision, their values, their mission? So considering those things is really important. And for the internship also, positioning yourself in a place where you can leverage your networks and also reach out to people, letting them know of your internship and job search, and being able to use that towards your own benefit, just to let people know that, hey, I'm looking for these positions because, there's a hidden job market out there, a lot of opportunities, including part-time roles and internship opportunities sometimes don't get posted, or sometimes they're available through word of mouth, or sometimes they get filled even before they're posted because they have someone in mind who they're recruiting or they're planning on hiring. And so keeping that in mind, that when you leverage your networks, whether it be online or offline, letting people, informing people about your job internship search and being able to start from scratch and noticing and building that platform and brand for yourself where you can sort of leverage your not only your networks but also your brand and informing people of your career goals and your next steps. And so that way people like your supporters and your networks and your family and friends, they can support you along the way on your process.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even the internship I have right now, came through my network. And so, like, networking is actually one of the biggest ways that people get internships or job opportunities or just advice on how to navigate the recruitment process. And so, looking at like how networking can lead to internships, do you know any other way you would like recommend students to discover internship opportunities, where to look, and how to find them?
Yeah, there's a lot of websites you can research specifically based on specific industries. I know, for example, for higher ed and education within my field, you can check different websites and go on there and look for internships like higheredjobs.com. There's Chronicles of Higher Education. There is there's a lot of different ones for community colleges. You can look into the CCC Apply California Community College System and
Mhm.
see what's available on there. If you're enrolled in a graduate program, for example, or in even undergraduate, you can check, I would say, with your career center and checking what kind of listings to have. I know a lot of schools and colleges use Handshake. Handshake is a great platform. You can check on there and see what might be available that matches your interest and your major or your program. Along with leveraging your networks, also again asking people offline, initiating those career conversations for the purpose of information interviewing will be really helpful. And doing your own research, knowing who you are, knowing where you want to go, knowing how you want to get there, and what is available to you is also really important. So doing your own homework and your research along with the networking and the information interviewing, I think is really important. And then also knowing where you want to go, essentially having more clarity on yourself. So career assessments can also help inform that process where you can receive more insights about how you want to approach the workplace, whether it be the Myers-Briggs type indicator assessment, MBTI for personality preferences, or for the strong interest inventory for your interests, or the strengths finder, finding out more about your own strengths and positive assets and seeing how that applies to your career goals and your career path. So I think assessment can also be a helpful avenue for you to find out more about how you want to approach the internship search and how you want to navigate those strategies in terms of informing your next steps in your process, where you can see like, do I see myself in an environment where I have to interact with people? Do I see myself in an environment where I work more independently? Do I see myself working in indoor settings or outdoor settings? Do I see myself working on a team and being more collaborative, or do I see myself working more individually and honing in on those preferences and those values for yourself? I think,
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's really important. Like even in UT, in one of my classes, we had to take something called the Clifton Strength Assessment. They
yeah.
tell us our like top five strengths, and it's actually like very indicative. Like when you see it, you're like, oh wait, that really does sound like me. But it's really important because not only like whenever you search for internships, you want to search something that fits your culture and your work ethic because that's where you're going to grow the most. And I completely agree with that you need to research before you find these internships because like interviewers and recruiters, like when they see your confidence and you know where you're applying, it already makes you stand out. And speaking of standing out, I want to transition to our next segment, which is mastering the application process. So after you get access to all of these internships, even like offline, when you network with your when you talk with your network, how do you think your application can stand out? How do you approach creating a good resume?
Yeah, so your application, your resume is only one part of your personal and professional brand, but I think understanding it from a holistic perspective and seeing like what are different things that apply to your brand. So like your online presence, your resume, your if your cover letter, if you have one, which I would highly suggest, make you stand out as an applicant, as a candidate, because the cover letter is essentially the why of your application process, whereas the resume is the what, where, when, and how. So your cover letter draws a bridge from your resume to the job description, the position itself. So essentially, I think having your application materials on file and being able to prepare for those, and also having an online presence, being active on LinkedIn, being able to collaborate with others in these spaces, whether it be people in your industry or on other with other sort of avenues or other career paths, making yourself stand out through those avenues, building your own brand, having an online portfolio, being able to focus on what are projects you worked on or presentations you've done in the past that you want to highlight on your LinkedIn page or on your website or as part of your application process. All of that will essentially help you stand out in the job search, internship search process because it highlights not only what you've done, but who you are and where you want to go. Essentially shows people that you're genuinely interested in what you're applying for and that you're going the extra mile by whether it be completing your cover letter or being active on LinkedIn or being able to stay engaged and informed about upcoming opportunities and also research in your avenue, in your field, and in your career path, and seeing how that applies to your own career goals and your next steps.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you mentioned the idea of why it's so important to have a cover letter. I know a lot of students, like until they get to their sophomore year, maybe don't really realize cover letters because in high school, that was not really a big part of how we applied to like college, for example, or any like scholarships. So can you talk about how you would recommend students approach the cover letter, and what instead of should it be them selling themselves in the cover letter or talking about how this certain internship experience is going to help them grow?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad you asked. I think it's more so about showcasing your strengths and your interest and your background in a way that is relevant for the position and for the opportunity you're applying for. So not so much selling yourself. I don't believe in being able to sell yourself because then you're sort of letting go of your own self for the sake of the opportunity, but more so showcasing your strengths, showcasing your skills and abilities and your personality and who you are in a cover letter to help the employer or the recruiter learn more about you as a person and your background and see are you a good fit for the position or are they a good fit for you essentially. And so the format I like to recommend specifically for cover letters is the present, past, future sort of format where presently you begin in the first paragraph talking about yourself, where you are currently in your program, what you're applying for, how you might have found out about the position, and then essentially including a topic sentence similar to an essay, starting with previewing your key points, and then the body, which is essentially the second and third paragraph of your cover letter, will essentially highlight your past experiences, your professional expertise, your past projects, any volunteer work, all that is part of your experience, not only paid work experience, but also I always tell students like your volunteer work, your community service, your leadership activities, your research, if you have any class projects, assignments, that's all part of your experience, not only paid full-time experience. So highlighting two or three examples in your letter in the second and third paragraph is essentially part of the past. The first one is present, and the past is like your examples, and then the future format is your future career outlook. In the end, where you talk more about your interests, how your goals connect with the employer's vision, values, and mission, how it connects with yourself as a person, what you're looking for, including information about your career aspirations and goals, and connecting it back to the position of interest, I think is really important. And including a conclusion where you essentially thank the interviewer regarding the opportunity and for their time and consideration. And also you express your gratitude and that you're genuinely interested in the position and you make your ask in the end where you sort of summarize your letter in the end of in the conclusion, again restating your key points and your thesis, pretty much your topic sentence in the end, recapitulating the points you've discussed in your conclusion. So that's sort of a cover letter in my training and experience in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think this advice would be so beneficial to students because I know that we like it's much more. students sometimes focus a lot on their resume and think that's the only thing that might be the biggest aspect of the application process. But when I got to college, I realized, wow, cover letters are actually something that makes students stand out within the application process. And so another part of the application process is like once you get that resume reviewed or talk to your network and you get that interview, how do you recommend students approach the interview process? Sometimes it can be a little bit jarring or can make kids feel a little
Yeah,
scared.
for sure. I'm glad you asked. It's very intimidating and it's an unnatural environment because interviewing is not a natural environment. Essentially, the employer is assessing you from an interpersonal perspective of who you are as a person, your background, confirming what they have on file for your resume and your application materials. And as you mentioned, the resume itself and even the cover letter and the application itself doesn't get you the position or the offer. It gets you the interview. The interview is what gets you the offer and the position itself. So the interview is really important. My strategies and advice on preparing for interview is essentially knowing what you have on file for your resume, knowing your background, and being able to have a tool set, a toolkit of stories you want to share with the interviewer about your success, and where you've done well and where you've accomplished your key accomplishments and your highlights, and having at least two or three stories, essentially, where you can talk about them in more detail and expand on your resume and your application materials, like your letter, where you can talk more about those key points in a more of a storytelling format and share more about your background. And so essentially, for the interview, preparing by writing things down has always been helpful for me personally. I always recommend students to write things down, whether it be in bullet point format or paragraph format, and practicing out loud with someone. um, I do mock interviews for my students and clients to helping them walking them through the questions and then helping them digest what are these questions asking you and how do you want to respond to them, and then giving them sort of my own personalized feedback. So I think that preparing for interviews not only is a one step thing, but it's a multi-step, a multifaceted process where you have to prepare in a lot of ways. A lot of interviewing is preparation and practice, and being able to prepare in advance and practicing out loud or practicing by recording yourself or practicing with a career advisor or counselor or like a mentor can be really helpful too, or practicing with a colleague or a friend and seeing how do I sound when I say these things, and writing things out and then saying them out loud is different too, because when you say certain things, in my experience, you want to make sure it sounds like you. So if I write something out and if I say it and if it doesn't sound like me, I would want to change it. And so I would advise my students to also consider, does this sound like me? Is this something I want to say about myself and my background? And preparing in advance for those questions, like those behavioral interview questions where they ask you, tell me about a time when you experienced a conflict and how did you approach it? Tell me about a time when you faced a difficult situation or experienced failure and how do you approach it? And so essentially for that, I recommend students to incorporate the STAR format or the STAR method, which is situation, task, action, result, talking more about it in a succinct manner where you talk about situation, you talk about what you did as a result of the task that was expected of you. You talk about the action as well as the action steps you took, and the results are the outcomes highlighting as a result of what you did and the situation what you accomplished and what should tells people about you and your background. So essentially for behavioral questions, which I know students struggle with a lot, considering like a method where you can highlight your key points and practice those is really important. And for
Yeah.
general questions, it's also important to highlight it from a perspective of, again, like what do I want the interviewer to know about me? What are things I'm comfortable sharing? What are things I might not be as comfortable sharing with the interviewer or the prospective employer?
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I think we even discussed it like prior that like confidence really is where like the interview is where you show your confidence and show your knowledge about the company, but also where you really establish your own brand. And I think that's something like students really need to um understand. It's a wonderful tip. Like the resume, the cover letter only show a little bit about you, but when you're face to face with someone and you're talking to them, that's where you actually that's where like that's the bow on the present. That's what wraps it all together is your voice and your brand. And so going off of that, securing the right internship is just the beginning. but like later on, like deciding the next step and the right path is just as important. So, what is your advice on maximizing the internship experience? Well, after you get your internship, how do you get the most out of it?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this, and also doing your research about the employer and company when you're interviewing is really important. So doing your homework, as you mentioned, is really important. For I think preparing advance for your next position or next full-time role after your internship, consulting with your colleagues, consulting with your supervisors, with your mentors, I think can go a long way. In my experience during my internships, I was always open to constructive feedback and consulting with my colleagues and supervisors regarding how I'm doing, and getting feedback was really helpful. And taking in what was helpful for me and sort of applying it to my own knowledge and expertise and how I want to move forward. So I think consulting and going through consulting with people and seeing how you're doing, and also self-reflection, I think is really important. So both consulting with others for feedback and seeing what you want to take in, how you want to apply that to your own future next steps, and then also self-reflecting upon your experiences and seeing where you want to improve. And I think those go hand in hand, consulting with others and self-reflection, because you can see tidbits of what other people think of you and tidbits about what you think about yourself and how you feel about yourself, and see what are things that might match up and what are things that might be a discrepancy. Because I think at the end of the day, you know yourself best, and so applying feedback from others and seeing how it applies to you from your own self-reflection, I think can go a long way. And then always being open to professional development training wherever you're interning, asking them and requesting or seeing if professional development and training is an opportunity that's included in your internship, in your position, and seeing how that can help you advance in your career path and in your field.
Yeah, and I think that also goes hand in hand with like not just putting 50% within your internship. Like whatever you get whatever you put into an internship. So if you put 110% in, you're gonna get 110% back. And I think like internships are also a great place where students can get like offers for full time, and that's they really like establish their network because like internships are like a two-way street, right? If they think that you add value, then you're going to be very valuable to them. And like going off of that, I really do think that like getting internships helps build relationships. So how is there any advice on how you think like students not just giving 50%, 110%, why that might be important?
Yeah, I think that's really important because it shows the person or the employer where you're working, your colleagues, that you're actually willing to go the extra mile and that you have excellent work ethic, and that goes a long way. I think your willingness to collaborate, to work with others, to demonstrate your work ethic and to do the work that is required of you and go above and beyond, I think goes a long way. Even if you might not notice it, I think others do notice you in those spaces, and they realize that this person is actually genuinely interested in what they're doing and that they're passionate about their work, and that I would like to offer them these upcoming opportunities, because internships can provide a training ground and also serve as a way for a full-time position after you graduate or after your time in college. And so essentially honing in on that and focusing on the relationship building, not only for the purpose of a job, but also for focusing on how can you help the person or the employer by contributing in those spaces, and how can it be a two-way street, I think can go a long way in focusing on the relationship building aspects and making it a meaningful and rewarding experiences for both you and for the employer.
Yeah, I think that that's wonderful advice. And I think this whole podcast call is gonna give students a lot of great advice, not just like how to start your cover letter, but you gave a lot of specific advice on how students can approach this process. And I think you really touched on the idea that internships are not just something you just like put on your resume, but it's something like it's an experiential learning experience, and things like that really help navigate and hone your path for the future in a very wonderful way. And so, before we conclude the call, do you have any last minute advice on for students, like little tidbits on how to navigate this process with confidence?
Yeah, I think having a vision for yourself, consulting with others, looking into having a mentor. Mentors are really important. I had a lot of mentors, I still do throughout the years, and then having that mentorship is really important. I think having someone you look up to or you admire and receiving their support and advice and their mentorship. So I would say one, find a mentor that you can develop a relationship with and trust and have that mentoring relationship. Two, have vision for yourself and focus on your next steps and focusing on who you are, what you're like, and how you want to inform your career goals. And three would be to don't take rejection as a failure, but take it as a redirection. So even if you're rejected an offer, consider that redirection and consider that as a way to move forward and as a way to learn from the experience and see that this might have not been a great opportunity for me, and that's why I wasn't offered this.
Yeah, I completely agree, and thank you so much for giving us this wonderful, wonderful podcast interview. And I think students would really, really love this call and learn a lot from it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.